It's 11 o'clock, and welcome to our third episode of In the Ministry with RSM. I'm Greg Strickland, Associate Evangelist with Rock Solid Ministries, and we're here with our Director of Rock Solid Ministries, Brother Tom Weaver. How are you doing this morning, Brother Tom?
I'm fairly well. Fair middling. That's right, yeah.
We'll take that for today. Maybe thankfully that we're here doing stuff online rather than on the road today. So that's good. Today we're talking about your marriage and family in the ministry. So a big topic, and if you're a preacher or maybe you're a preacher's wife and able to join us today, or youth minister's wife, maybe a ministry kid, PK or something like that. So we hope that this will be a benefit to you today as we just try to share some thoughts. Brother Tom, what is it about the ministry that's particularly hard on a marriage, you think?
What isn't hard? I mean, really, but you know, I want to put this in context that any job you do,
That's right,
can be hard, and things that you deal with at work, that you deal with at home, and you bring it home. But there are some things that are peculiarly hard in the ministry because we don't work on set hours. Mm-hmm. And I know the old joke, well, you only work 1 hour a week on Sunday. That's not true. You know that. We work many hours. There are many times that I can remember that I just decided to clock my hours, and I found out I was working 15 hours days, mm-hmm. 7 days a week mm-hmm. in ministry. So that is one of the things. Plus, you are, as they say, living in a glass house.
right. That's true. So if we all know it's not a 9-to-5 job. I've had elders that really like to remind me that, this isn't a 9-to-5 job. You need to be available whenever we at our beck and call for this or that, and that's true. We know it's not a 9-to-5 job. You don't go in at 9 and be done at 5 every night. But I think the frustrating thing for me, and maybe for my family, was that there were long hours because in ministry there's really no stopping point.
No.
You're never done ministering.
I remember having elders, wonderful elders down in southwest Arkansas that told me one time, Tom, take a few days off. You're just working too hard. And I said, it's not like an assembly line that I can flip a switch and come back and everything's right there in place. We finish on Sunday. We have to be ready for Wednesday or for small groups or for the next Sunday. And then we've got calls to make and people in the hospital. You just can't flip a switch and everything just stops and you come back. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't understand it. I appreciated their kindness and their understanding, but there was no way that I could do what they were asking me to do, particularly at that time in the life of the church.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's not even like there's a product that you're putting out and you can say, oh, this is finished, because we can finish the sermon, but there's one to write for next week.
Or someone gets dried off in the baptistry and we've got some others to talk to.
Yeah, and there's more calls to make. There's certainly no shortage of people who don't know Christ.
Yeah.
So we could fill every waking hour with ministry. So how do we learn to cut back? How do we learn to limit that so that we don't neglect our families?
Well, you may be talking to the wrong person, but I think you have to set some limits on yourself. And say, here's time. Now, if it's a lost soul who they are ready to talk about Christ, I can't put that off. I've got to take care of that. If someone dies and the family is in desperate need at that point, you can't cut that off. But there are some things you can say. I am not going to have another committee meeting. I'm not going to do another team meeting of some kind. You can do this without me. There are things that you can do without me. And I think our elders need to learn too. There are things that they can do without us, and that they can get some things done. And actually, if they're doing their job as shepherds, there's a lot of things that we wouldn't have to do that they should be out doing so that we could do the evangelism.
That's true.
But of course, that's talking to somebody else, not us.
Right.
I think there's just times where you have to put a cutoff time and say, it's just going to have to wait if it's not a life and death situation.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you said, what became my practice was I was curious as to how much I was working too. And this is the way that I began logging my time, and I kept a log of it just for my own, so I knew what I was doing. And if there were any criticisms, I could say, look, this is what I've been doing. So I just wrote down that, you know, every day, Monday I work this many hours, Tuesday I work this many hours. But this is kind of the format that I came to in my life, was that I thought, you know, I'm paid to do a 40-hour week job, at least. That's just kind of the standard. But, you know, I ask everybody else in my church to do their 40-hour week job and then serve in the kingdom too.
Yeah.
Teach Sunday school class, or to go calling, or to, you know, whatever else it is. Mow the church yard or whatnot. So I thought, you know, really I ought to give of my time, other than the time that I'm being paid to be a Christian, if you want to put it that way. And so I just decided I'm going to at least work 48 hours a week. Right. And I don't think there's very many guys who would say that they don't work 48 hours a week in ministry. Right. And if you're a bivocational minister, that
wouldn't affect
that'd be very difficult for you, and we understand that. We're not saying that, but you know, and then from there, like you said, take care of the things that need to be taken care of, but learn to put off the things that aren't emergencies.
And remember that your family is an emergency.
That's right.
I mean, they really are. If you're thinking emergency, they're an emergency. They need your time. Mm-hmm. They need your love, and they need to know that you care about them as much as you care about the church. Possibly more.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, and as far as that goes, I think time spent with our spouse. I think we need to have date night. Weekly or at least monthly. We need to have some. And I'm not saying that we have to spend a lot of money, but we need to definitely get away.
No, there are a lot of things you can do. In fact, I had written those down on the back of this page, but some things you can do. Depending on where you live, there are museums that are free. Mm-hmm. And once your kids are all in school, hey, you actually could have a day and actually have a date with just the two of you.
That's right.
I used to take, once my kids became teens, we had three of them, and every 3 months they got a full day with Dad by themselves, one child. And I would ask them what they want to do. My son wanted to go and ride go-karts, things like that. One daughter wanted to shop. Another one said, I just want to go for a drive. I just want to go see some of the country. And that's what we did. And that was a very busy time of ministry for me, but I felt like that was a time where they had my full attention for one whole day. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was every 3 months, but they got my attention other times too.
Yeah, sure. And talking about kids, unless there's an emergency, I try never to miss a football game or a soccer game or things like that. Because not only did my kids need to see me there like other dads, but what a great ministry opportunity. That's part of my job, is to be out in the community, to know these other parents that I'm sitting by and interact with them, to be flipping burgers, to sell with the
band parents.
Yeah, the band parents or the quarterback club or whatever it was, you know. And so there's some perfect opportunities as well to mix family time and ministry opportunities.
And you need to go and you say, well, my kids, they're not the sports star. Well, let me tell you, my kids weren't. I mean, they just were not. And the band competitions we went to, of course, they were involved in that. But mm-hmm. sports events, I remember softball games. Oh my goodness, softball tournaments we went to, and our kids were not the ones who were out there playing. They were a lot of times thought to be the best cheerleaders that the team had, because they were on the sidelines most of the time. But we were there, and we were spending time with other church families and other families from our community. So it was ministry as well, right. And that was a good time. And another thing was making hospital calls, and when the kids were old enough, taking one or more of them with me, mm-hmm. and letting them see what ministry's like, and then taking them to a park, spending time with them, go out and get a hamburger and take them to the park or something like that.
Yeah, that's true. What about when you are at home? Okay, now we've left the office, we're not at the hospital, we're not in other people's homes. What can we do to protect the time that we have at home?
Well, I think I may have mentioned this last week, but for me, because I am, some people call me a workaholic. But thank you for not saying that. But
I know some people that are like that, and you're watching this, so you know who I'm talking to.
And I had to just, I had to say, my family it's a church family.
Mm-hmm.
And just like I minister every church family, I've got to minister my family, but a little extra. And I need to block aside that time to be with this particular church family. And I didn't do it just because they're church family, but that helped my mind, my workaholic mind, to say.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it worked out great, because then I got with them and we had a good time, and we did some fun things. And that was one of the things that helped me to protect. And then to say to church people, they said, well, you got to come do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't life and death. And I could say, I already have an appointment with another church family.
Yeah.
And that's where I was, yeah.
And we kind of mentioned this last week too, but there was a time when if you weren't in the office and you weren't home, you were unavailable anyway, before we had those cell phone things.
Love that.
So, you know, I don't see anything wrong. If you're at home, screen your calls. If you know, especially during dinner time and family time like that, you know, if it's an emergency, they'll leave a message.
Well, it seemed like every time before we had cell phones, every time we bowed our heads at dinner table to pray, I just felt like I needed to hold one hand out toward the wall for the phone, knowing it was going to ring, because we're fixing to pray for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right about that.
What about, I think another thing that's particularly hard on a ministry marriage is maybe the expectations of wives, preachers' wives, youth ministers' wives. Tell me a little
the church
bit about that.
expectations.
Yeah, the expectations of church people.
Well, I'm going to say, first of all, I don't think the expectations are as bad as they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be a good thing or a bad thing in what it says about the world. But on the whole, some congregations it's still going to be as much, and especially in smaller communities and smaller congregations. But there are expectations, and our wives need to understand that they just need to be a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Just need to be a Christian, and not everybody's going to be satisfied with you. Not everybody's satisfied with my preaching.
Right.
Not everybody's going to be satisfied with you as a minister's wife or the child of a minister, but be a Christian. And if you don't want to be a Christian, then that's a whole different story.
Right.
And there are some ministers' wives and some preachers who don't want to be a Christian. They're just doing this for a job.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something different there. You need to get out of ministry.
Mm-hmm.
But just live the life of a Christian the best that you possibly can. And know that you only have to satisfy your Father in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
That's who you need to satisfy.
That's a good point.
It's not an excuse not to do well and to do good.
Mm-hmm.
But that's who you have to satisfy. And that's when we preach, that's who we have to satisfy. If people don't like the sermon, well, I'm sorry you didn't like it, but it wasn't you that I was trying to satisfy.
Exactly. I think preachers' wives, as well as preachers, as well as, to a certain extent, preachers' kids, we're gonna be role models. That doesn't mean that we have to be fake. It doesn't mean that we have to put on a happy face for everything. Not that we should share everything in life, but I think, like you said, just be a Christian, which includes not always having a happy face, but having a friend, it may be in the congregation, hopefully some outside the congregation that you can go to and say, you know, if they ask you, because you're not fake and happy face all the time, what is wrong, then you can be honest and go, well, I'm dealing with this. Can you pray with me? It's all about the motivation that we have. Are we motivated to be a certain way because we're the preacher's wife, or we're the preacher, or we're the preacher's kids, or because we're Christians?
Like a lot of people put on a mask when they walk into church on Sunday morning.
Oh, yeah.
The preacher family does not have to wear a mask 24/7. They don't need to wear a mask at all. They
Right.
just need to be who they are.
Yeah.
And if your congregation can't handle who you are, and you are doing your best to live a Christian life, I want to make that clear.
Right, yeah.
Then maybe you need to be somewhere else.
Mm.
But you need to live, and in a small congregation, they're going to know who you are, and you need to be involved, the family needs to be involved in the ministry of the church, because they're Christians, not because they're the preacher's kids or the preacher's wife.
Mm-hmm.
But you should be involved somehow, because every Christian should be involved.
Absolutely.
And your involvement may be that you're a very sweet person who makes folks feel comfortable. That may be all that That may be your calling, or your calling may be teaching, or it may be singing, but you should be involved. In a small church, people will see that, and they may judge you by how you do that. In a large church, they may not. I remember a story a wonderful story that Ben Merrill told when he was preaching out in California. He used to give illustrations all the time about his wife, about Pat, and he would tell these illustrations and about just wonderful stories about his wife. And one day, one of the choir members turned to another choir member, a lady that was sitting next to her, and she said, "Well, I'd sure like to meet this saintly lady someday." Well, she didn't know that was actually Pat, because it was such a big church, they didn't know. But Pat was just being a Christian, and wouldn't have need in that big church for everybody to know that she was the preacher's wife. She was just being a Christian, and I think that's the point we need to get to.
Yeah, and I know that there's preachers' wives and maybe even preachers' kids that deal with an expectation of how they will serve, and I think, like you said, I would agree that every preacher's wife, every preacher's kid, every preacher, everybody in the church needs to be expected to serve in the kingdom with whatever gift and talent that they have. But our family shouldn't feel pressured to do that any more than any other person in the church is pressured to, or to fit into a certain box or way of service. Not every preacher's wife has to play the piano or teach a Sunday school class, or that's what I've heard. So how do we defeat those kind of expectations that are thrust on our family?
Okay, I don't think we defeat them. I don't think there's any way you can defeat them. There are always people going to always have extra expectations for preachers' wives and their kids. I think, again, I'm going to come back to it. Live a Christian life, and as preachers' wives, put no higher expectation on yourself than you have for any other woman in the church. And if you get an opportunity, if the ladies say, "We'd like you to speak at the ladies' meeting," then that's a good opportunity to say, "I don't have any higher expectations for myself than I have for you. And you should have no higher expectations for me." Then, of course, your talent may not be speaking in front of ladies' groups, but use that opportunity to share with other people that my expectations for me are the same as my expectations for you or any other Christian woman.
Right.
And if I have a place and a talent and a gift to serve, I'm going to use it.
One place as a preacher, I tried to head that off at the pass was just in interviewing with the church, because more than likely that question is going to come up if they have some of those expectations. Does your wife teach Sunday school classes, or does she play the piano, or does she keep the nursery, or and oddly enough, I don't know of any other vocation where your spouse is in the interview or even considered anything during the interview. I think churches have to do that, because the preacher's wife, you can break the preacher's ministry.
Boy, yes.
You can't make it, because he's still got to be, a certain level of a preacher. He has to be morally good, and there's certain things that he has to be able to do. So you can't necessarily make a ministry. You can't have a lousy guy in there and people go, "Well, but his wife's really great."
Although I have seen it at times.
But you definitely can break his ministry. You can have the number one preacher in the world, So I think congregations have to look at that, but I think we as preachers also play a role in kind of heading that off at the pass and saying, "My wife is a Christian lady like any other in the church."
Right. I think that's, and we have to, and I don't, congregations, again, unless they're small congregations, they usually don't ask that like they used to. I remember being asked one time back in the 70s or early 80s, when people were just starting to work on Sundays. They said, "Well, do you believe that people should work, what do you believe about working on Sundays?" And I said, "Well, I do." And they were pretty offended by that, but they didn't understand that even though I was coming to worship and minister, it was also work. There was an awful lot I had to do because it was work. And the same thing about asking about a minister's wife or your family. Are your kids well behaved or anything like that? And I'd say, "Well, I think they're as well behaved as any of your kids."
That's,
and then they may not hire you once you.
Well, being as we're let's see, 20 minutes in, what ramifications are there for our kids having dads in the ministry?
Well, let me see. I think you skipped over where I.
if you got something else you want to say about that.
Well, I did want to say on
Right.
the idea of other before we get to that. Other things that come on is the emotional stress, dealing with emergencies and death. These are other things that deal with the whole family has to deal with that, and the minister comes home with that, and that's another added pressure on the minister's family. We're not just preachers; we're EMTs, we're emergency ministry technicians. Family is always on call, and especially in small church, even on vacation. There are times I've left on vacation knowing that we could be 500 miles away, and they're going to call and say Sister so and so passed away, and they have no one else that they trust to take care of that. And those are just some other stresses that come on that people, I think a lot of folks don't realize, and we may have some. In fact, I know we have people listening who are not in vocational ministry, if we can use that term. And I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, keep that in mind. Ramifications.
Yeah.
Get into that for our kids. Now, let me say that they see the ugly side of the church. And when I first became a Christian, I grew up in a denominational church. I became a Christian right here in Corinth, Mississippi while visiting with my grandparents. I went back home to Arkansas. I went back to my denominational church. There was no Restoration Church. The closest one was over 50 miles away, and after that it was over 100. And that senior year in high school, they said, well, we know you've made a tremendous commitment in your life. I'd already been a member of that church, but I wasn't a Christian. Now I came back a Christian with a lot of zeal and excitement. And they said, we'd like to put you on one of the church committees, or it's kind of a board committee, so you can see how this functions and how this is done. And there were women on this group, and a young lady from our youth group was put on there with me. And I remember going to it. It dealt with outreach or something like that. And this was my first experience, because I had always gone to church. I saw the good side of everything, the Sunday school and the singing and the preaching and the friendliness. I got into this meeting, and I thought we were going to talk about evangelism. That church didn't deal with evangelism, but I thought that's what we were going to talk about, because I was naive. And the first thing brought up, when the lady says, and she's pretty put out about it, we are the only major church in downtown with a gravel parking lot. And we've got to fix that. And well, you can see the horror on the preacher's face. Here we go again. This is my first meeting. And he tried to kind of calm things down, that we're trying to do other things here. And she said, when we get out of our cars and walk in church, our white shoes are just dirty. And and that's what the whole meeting took on. And I saw an ugly side of the church there. But it's a good lesson for our kids, because they learn pretty quick the parable of the weeds, where Jesus said that you got to leave the weeds to grow with the wheat until the time of harvest, and we need to learn that. They just learned it a little bit earlier. And they also have to deal with jealousy. There are people who look at our families, and there's some who know we're not perfect, others who think we are, and they're jealous, and sometimes they take that out on the kids, and then they have to deal with anger. Some families who look at our families and say, we're not perfect and you should be, and they're angry about that. So these are all things I think our kids and families have to deal with.
I know one of my sons said when he got to Bible college, he had some friends who somehow thought that ministry was going to be glamorous. And he said not many of them are in ministry today.
Yeah.
So yeah, they definitely have an honest picture, I suppose, of what's going on.
We've served in growing churches, and where we've had young families, young married men and women who decide, well, we can be a minister too. And sometimes they've tried to kind of take over, and they have no idea. They don't see inside. They don't see what's happening in the family. They don't know about the 15-hour days. They don't know what it's taken to get to church to this particular point. All they see is Sunday morning when you're up there preaching and people are enjoying the message or not.
Right.
But they see that and they have no idea.
I know there's several of the different military branches and different squadrons, and they have this saying, first in, last out. I think of that with preachers' kids. We like to get there early in the morning, and if your wife's serving in some way, maybe she's got to be there too, which means we drag all the kids in at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we're the first in, then we're the last out. You know,
Yeah.
turning off the lights at 12:30 or 1 o'clock.
If you have multiple services,
Yeah.
which we've dealt with that a lot in our ministries, and usually at least one of the kids or two of them are going to go and help you get things set up. And that's a good thing. They're learning ministry and they're learning things that go with it. But yeah, it's a lot of hours. Sometimes you start at 6 in the morning on Sunday and you're leaving the church building at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And in our ministries, we always had evening services, so we had to back for evening services, and so that and the family's always involved in all of that.
I know I maybe at certain times leaned a little too heavily on my kids to serve in the church in places where, you know, when we started a church in Kansas, we said to my oldest son, we need a bass player this week, so here's a bass guitar and this is how you play the 3 notes that you're going to need this week, and you know, so there you go, you're the bass player. And you know, we need somebody to run the computer, so you're now the computer tech. And that maybe that's not fair, but at the same time, those are things that they're still using today. And
We moved to new church work.
things.
Our oldest daughter was 16, and we said, well, they don't have a pianist. She's been taking piano lessons. We said, you're the pianist. And she did a good job. But that particular ministry, I told my kids before we moved that we can't do this if all of you don't work and help us to build this little church. And thankfully they all did.
Well, I think, you know, going back to the way our wives serve, we should give some thought to how our kids are talented, how they're gifted, and how they could serve in the church, you know, and be careful about forcing them into ministries that they're not really suited for.
And they're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
They may have a talent, but at certain particular ages, they may not be comfortable doing it just yet. And if you ask another child in the church to do something, and they said, I'm not comfortable, you wouldn't push them into it. Even if you knew that they could do that job, you just say, okay, we'll give you some time, and we go back and ask them again a little later.
Any other thoughts that you thought of about things that preachers' kids deal with?
Well, they deal with their parents sometimes not sticking up for them. Sometimes we're more apt to stick up for another kid in church other than our own, just because the pressure is put on us. And as parents, we need to be careful about that. We also need to realize that sometimes somebody says something about our child, and it's a merited criticism, and we need to listen to that too.
Right.
But we also need to say, now, would you say that to someone else?
Right.
That their child was involved in it too. Now you go tell them too, please.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But
And I think we do need to stick up for them. I remember one time specifically, one of my sons, I don't remember which one it was that this lady was complaining about, but had fairly long hair. And she asked Lori out loud in public in front of a bunch of people, when are you going to tell him to cut his hair? And she said, well, if my son has long hair, I think that's one of the last things that I need to worry about. If he wants to have long hair and he's doing everything else in his life that he is doing correctly, I'm not going to worry about his long hair.
you know, I remember moving to a church in Oklahoma. Great folks, and one of the elders there, his oldest son, had a mohawk. You remember mohawks?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I mean, it was a boy. It was a big honking
A good
mohawk.
one.
I'm telling you. Yeah. And I remember what this elder's wife, well, actually it was a deacon at the time, his wife said, you know, we pick our battles. And we feel like this is not a battle. If he wants a mohawk, let him have a mohawk. You know, if that's how he wants to rebel, let him have a mohawk. He ended up working for one of the government agencies, with tobacco and firearms and everything, and became an agent, and a great guy. But I thought that was and we took that and ran with it. And may I say something that Don from Arkansas, Don just said that's how he learned bass. He was totally the bass player. So thanks, Don, for adding that. That's good. Yeah.
One of the other things that was mentioned to me was, as if you are a preacher serving in a small church and you have teenagers, maybe your youth group is your kids and maybe one other or two other kids, and maybe you or your wife are the youth group leaders. And man,
bless their hearts.
Yeah, bless their hearts. You know, your kids, how do you, what are your ideas on dealing? I've got some ideas on how to help with that.
Well, I wish you'd go ahead and share that. Because I'm going to tell you that in churches where they said, now you're going to be youth minister too, I told them that was not my thing. I began preaching when I was 18, and I never felt like I was a youth minister.
Yeah, I didn't.
So the few times I had to do it, I guess I did all right, but I never felt like I was very good at it. So you go ahead and share what I did.
Well, I was just, my train of thought was, you know, why not have something at your church for your kids? But we need to work with other churches, and I'm not talking about churches of other denominations necessarily, although I think we can do that where we're maybe doing something in the community for the good of the community that doesn't have to do with doctrine. But you know, we have, even in North Mississippi, where Mississippi is not full of Christian churches of Christ, in North Mississippi we have churches within the area where small churches that are kind of like that, where we could be sharing youth group with one another. We could be coming together as the church and doing youth group.
Yes.
And having several kids, and it could be shared. You know, sometimes churches kind of like, well, we're going to have it at our church. Or, you know, we don't want to have it at their church because they'll steal all of our kids. You know, well, have it someplace else, or do it once a month, or shift it around with different leaders, whatever. But you know, I'm not going to say that not working with our sister churches is wrong, but it sure ain't right.
Yeah.
We need to be working together with our churches more often, and I think that's a big way where small churches could really help.
And I think in areas, in rural areas, if there's a large church that, say, has a youth minister, if they would contact the churches in their area and say, we would love to have your kids at a youth program, we're not trying to get them in here but if you don't have a youth program or you want help, what can we do to help you?
Right.
How can we help to serve you in that way? And that would, again, maybe get the parents away from having to teach their children, not having to teach, but for the children's sake.
Right.
That they don't, that it's not, I got to hear Dad preach, and I got Dad doing the youth lesson, and it's us three, his kids, and one other kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would be, and some guys are real good at that and would do well with it. But that's probably what they don't want.
Any other thoughts that you want to share? I mean, we're to Q&A time if we've got any questions popping up. But while we wait for them, anything else?
I would just think some things that would help in the stress of the ministry is playing together as a family, doing games inside and outside, doing cheap stuff. If you're in a situation like we always were raising kids, we didn't have any money.
Right.
The free museums with the kids or without the kids, you know, but on picnics. Just finding things that you can afford to do or that are just don't really cost you much, but they are memories that your kids will have. My kids have told me through the years, we were able to take them to Disneyland and a few of the theme parks growing up, but they remember most of all time on Mount Nebo in Arkansas. When we just went up there with our tents and camped, and that was our entire vacation, and those were the best vacations that they remembered. And I think it was $12 a night for a camping site with electricity. Well, who can beat that? The call night on your family, as I talked about, but I'm calling on this family, it's mine. Praying with your wife, and I don't mean just saying we're having our devotion, we're going to pray now. But here's a thought, guys, and this could go the other way around too for the wives. Walk up to your wife in the kitchen just every once in a while. Just walk up to her and put your arms around her, and don't say, I want to pray with you. Just put your arms around her and say a prayer for her. And give her a kiss and walk away. You'd be surprised the impact that'll have, and vice versa. But date your spouse. If you like that one too, date your spouse. Yeah. I know we've got question times. I don't know if we've got any coming up.
Got any questions rolling up?
Not yet.
No questions right now?
We've got folks from West Virginia here. Good to see folks from West Virginia, and certainly Mississippi and Missouri. Oh my goodness, lots of places around. Louisiana. Good to see you, Brother Boswell.
How about that?
Isn't that great? Northwest Louisiana, and Gary Henline from over in the beautiful Tennessee mountains. what else you see there? You see some of the names? Good to see all y'all here.
Here's something I thought about last night as we were doing this is, guys, listen to your wife. Your wife notices your mood that you're in and your needs and when you're getting burned out. And I was really shocked and surprised that Lori said to somebody one time that she knew exactly when my ministry somewhere was over and how long it took, because I could put myself into it for so long and before I ran out of gas. And so your wife knows you, so listen. She also knows other women. And when your wife says, look out for that woman.
Yes.
Look out for that woman. And you may go, what in the world are you talking about? Your wife knows women.
Boy. Yes. My wife would say to me, she would say to me, never be alone with that woman. Mm-hmm. And I'd say, what in the world are you talking about? She'd just say, never be alone with her. And it took me a little while, because I'm pretty dense, and but it would sink in, and I would see exactly what she was talking about. And just be careful.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Yeah. Never be alone with any woman unless she's your grandma's age. That's what I heard. Okay, there's some questions, Laura?
Yeah, Chris says, I would love some advice about how to extend out to other congregations, maybe even be able to plant the seed. I think he's referring, because he had referred to being surrounded by some denominational churches. How to reach out to them.
Well, if you're talking about just influencing other denominations, I don't know if that's where you're going or not. I think it's a little bit off topic. We could deal with that on a different one, but just real quickly, meeting together with other preachers to pray.
He says how to reach out and collaborate.
Oh, to collaborate.
I was hearing that differently. I was hearing with this idea.
And I just think whether are we talking? Is this Chris a big church or small church kind of guy? There's two people.
I believe small.
Okay, small. So I just reach out and say, hey, you know what? This is where we are, and I assume this is where you are. What can we do?
I think building relationships first will help. Mm-hmm. And I know where Chris is coming from. There's a lot of restoration churches in his area. I can mention what went on here for a lot of years in Corinth was Monday breakfast with preachers, and they always said, don't bring a notepad. We're not doing business. We're just coming in and having breakfast and talking. And a lot of things came out of that. Mm-hmm. The brush arbor, the annual brush arbor that they do in Mississippi, and some other things that go on. And if you could say to them, as many as can come, we're going to meet once a week or once a month, and we're just going to we're not talking business, we're just having breakfast. But out of that may come these times of collaboration where you can pull together with youth programs or youth rallies and things like that can work. But I think that's where it starts, is getting to know these guys just on a friendly basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we have another question here. Is there any guidelines from Evan, any guidelines on sharing struggles with kids? I want them to see the incredible victories. I don't want to burden them with my problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you didn't get that from my house, then I'm probably not the person to answer that. So I understand what he's saying, though.
I think I grew up in a family that I never knew what my parents, where they were at financially. Mm-hmm. I never knew what they paid for the house, anything like that. I didn't know when they were struggling. I think that wasn't the best thing. I think I should have known some of the struggles. Mm-hmm. But I'm also thankful that I didn't know all of them. Right. And I didn't know all of their worries when Vietnam was raging in the late 60s. My dad was always watching the news, but he never came in and just wrung his hands and talked about the world situations and stuff. And he rarely ever did I hear a problem from the department store where he worked. Never. He just, and we'd hear some funny stories, some good things. And I think that's the thing, is share the good stories and the victories. As the kids get older, it might be good to say with them, why don't you sit and pray with Dad about this?
Mm-hmm.
This is a situation that's going on, one that is age appropriate, so that they understand that there are difficulties you have to deal with. And believe me, they're going to see it on your face anyway. They're going to see the stress, but it's not bad to let them know that you have struggles, because they need to know that every Christian has struggles, and that you go to your Father in heaven, so that maybe they'll come to you and then eventually learn to go to their Father in heaven. But I would let them know everything's going on, just age appropriate, and even when they get to be teenagers, that's not the appropriate age to know everything.
Right.
That's going on.
Evan says, Dad did fine. I just wondered how he did fine.
You just got to be careful. It's just, everybody is. This is what I learned from going to counseling, and which we talked a little bit about last week. Let me make sure that I say this correctly. Children are fantastic observers.
Yes.
However, they are terrible interpreters. So they will see every emotion that you have. They can observe it. They understand it by your tone of voice, your facial expression. They know exactly where you are emotionally and how you feel, and whether they need to, it's okay to be around you, or whether they need to back off. They know all that stuff, but they're terrible interpreters because they don't know why. And they often assume that it's them.
Right.
And so that's just, I think, where we really have to be careful in all walks of life, but in ministry for sure, is, making sure that our kids know that when we're in a bad mood, it might be them, but not necessarily.
I think that's the case with most kids. Once in a while you run across a child that knows that you're having problems, knows exactly why, because their ears are perked up and they hear everything, and you have to be so careful. Our oldest was like that. She knew everything. Mm-hmm. She's got one just like that now, and I laugh and say, that's you. But they have to be extremely careful, because they do know everything that's going on. I did see that Mike from Ohio said that, unfortunately, the churches in our area have no interest in collaboration. And that's a shame, because there's so many churches in Ohio.
Yeah.
But I would say, Mike, and maybe you've done this, but maybe you can find one congregation and get together with leaders from that church and have a breakfast. And eventually maybe they will know somebody else and pull somebody. It may take some time. Mm-hmm. And that's a shame, because it used to be our congregations, they wanted to get together all the time. Mm-hmm. But that's something, I guess, that we've not taught in our colleges, the benefit of learning from one another and of supporting one another outside the local congregation. We want to be autonomous. We've gotten in some situations where we're way overboard with that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't even share our ideas.
I think a lot of guys are really thinking about building their own kingdom, and if we let somebody go over to their church for some kind of special program, or so, they might decide they like it over there better.
And we need to remember, it's the prayer is not thy kingdom, my kingdom come. It's thy kingdom come.
Right. Yeah.
It's about the Lord's kingdom.
Well, we're right at about 45 minutes. Is there have any other questions that are popping up here?
I don't see any more.
Well, we do want to remind everyone that this program will be on our podcast page as an audio program, and eventually it'll be uploaded to the video page of our website.
Absolutely. So you can check that out later if you had to walk away or weren't unable to hear part of it or see part of it.
And what is the website?
Website, rocksolidministries.org. And you can also find us, Rock Solid Ministries, on YouTube channel. There's sermons and these videos as well. We're in the process of learning how to get those onto the website. So we've got a few videos on the website, but you can definitely find them at the Rock Solid Ministries YouTube page.
And all of our podcasts that we've done are on the podcast page, and they're also on Podbean app. And encourage you to go and check those out. And also, while you're on our website, why don't you click on the newsletter and sign up? And we put out a newsletter about 6 times a year now, and we'd love for you to sign up and get that. We're not going to inundate you with newsletters one after another, and we're not sending them out to ask for money, because if you know us, you know that's not what we do.
Right. And of course, we leave all this stuff up on our Facebook page as well. So,
Right.
and I encourage you to share it with other people.
Please
on
do.
Facebook too. So we'll see you back next week at 11 a.m.
Lord willing.
Lord willing. All right. God bless you. Have a great week.